last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, if I can still say that. And I guess, what the hell? Any other genders out there that may be listening? This is, of course, Dark Matters Radio. My name is Don Ecker. I will be your host. And boy, do we have a great show planned this evening. Now, I got to tell you up front, first off, I kind of feel like a piker because when I put a promo up for tonight's show, I used a photograph taken almost 25 years ago of my guest down in Orlando, Florida, because quite frankly, that was the only one I had available, and I was too lazy to go online. I've been up to my ears in other things, but I said my guest is somebody I have known for about 30 years, and he was one of the principal investigators of the Roswell event. And of course, there's a hell of a lot of other things to his credit, but I kept it kind of short and sweet. Then my producer, Bill Skywatcher, put up a promo for tonight's show, and my God, he had an entire book with my guest credentials. And who am I talking about but Mr. Donald R. Schmitt? Don, how the heck are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, and especially this evening being with you, Don, tonight. So thank you for having me.
Well, it's a distinct pleasure. It's been a while since we've really communicated. I guess, Don, the last time I actually saw you, let me think, was, 6-7 years ago when we were both at a interview filming for what ultimately became the Phenomenon movie. Back then, there was Tracy Torme and James Fox were working in tandem. Later, it just was James Fox. And my interview, of course, and nobody ever bothered to get back to me to tell me one way or the other, was left on the cutting room floor.
Welcome to the club.
Well, you know, now that I think about it, Don, I watched the movie, and I got to tell you, I thought there was I found it damn good, and there was information in there. And this kind of shocked me, information that I was not aware of.
Correct.
But you were given producer credit on that. How did that work out?
Well, I was actually invited by, you had mentioned Tracy Torme, at the very beginning, when they originally had flown me to L.A. to do my interview. And we had the good fortune of having Colonel Bob Friend, the late Robert Friend, the second last director of Project Blue Book, as you remember. And I'm sure you met and talked with him yourself.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And we hit it off very well. And in fact, it got to the point, it was like, Don, we can't get a word out of him acknowledging anything. Why don't you have a crack at it? Well, it worked. It did. I got him to admit things and say things. Like I asked him, for example, now if they did actually recover bodies from a crash retrieval. Where would they be today? And without hesitation, he snapped and he goes, well, of course, Dugway in Utah. That's the Military Biological Research Facility. Well, what Friend didn't know was that we had first-hand witnesses at Dugway. And that when, as far as one of Hynek's bosses, Dr. Jalen Hynek's bosses at Wright-Patterson, we even made comment of Utah, that we got 5 bodies in Utah before he died. So Friend thought that he was speaking safely, and little did he know. So he just additionally confirmed what we already had information about.
Now, wait a second. I got a question. Now,
Yeah.
were you talking in generalized terms?
Yes.
Or did Friend admit there were bodies there, or was that the place where they would send bodies if they had them?
All of the above, because I presented him with a hypothetical, and he immediately responded, Dugway. So, as I described, he had no idea that we had even focused on Dugway, that we had any information regarding Dugway, and yet there he was. And another thing that he acknowledged to me, which I had never known, was guess where he was stationed back in July of 1947?
The 509th?
No, he was at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio.
Ah.
And he was aware, he acknowledged that the wreckage did come into Wright Field. In contrast to what General Roger Ramey announcing at the infamous weather balloon press conference at his office at Carswell Army Airfield. And so he acknowledged that, yes, the wreckage came in from Roswell. But then he said, but I was convinced it was a broken arrow, an errant atomic bomb. Well, then when I informed him, well, we didn't have any bombs in our arsenal at that time. There was nothing stateside.
Well, there were at the 509th, Don, I believe, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I believe that they had maybe 10, maybe 11 stored there in the depot.
Through the course of the subsequent years, but at that time in July of 47, they did not. The 2 bomb pits that were at the Roswell Army Airfield were empty at that time. In fact, when they were conducting their bomb drop exercises, in fact, we've even, Kevin Randall and I years ago, we even stumbled upon a number of the abandoned emergency runways out in the middle of the desert for these B-29s as they were practicing, drops. And they were using sand barrels of equivalent size and weight. So that's, how they were, practicing. And even their loading exercises, they were having a hell of a time taxiing up to the bomb pits and loading up, again, these sand barrels, again, equivalent weight of an actual atomic bomb into the bomb bays. So they were doing everything using hydraulic jacks. They were even deflating the tires of the airplane, lowering it down to the bomb, hoping that it should load easier. So we're listening to all these descriptions of the personnel. And the other thing is, like, the bomb racks themselves weren't even at Roswell at that time. They were kept at Wright Field. So it was, everything was focused on Roswell as far as like Soviet spies and attention at that time. But as far as it was all very safe in that they did not have any bombs there at that time. So for Friend to suggest that this was a broken arrow, an errant atomic bomb, he was quite surprised when I corrected him on that. And then he still said, well, it still wasn't any damn balloon. Well, yes, we pretty much concluded that. So here was the likes of a Colonel Robert Friend, who you couldn't really get to acknowledge anything, who was stationed at Wright Field at that very time, saying that it wasn't any weather balloon, contrary to what the government is still trying to, convince us of.
Yeah, well, that's always been that's always been a lame story they tried to float. In 97, on the 50th anniversary
right.
of that, because I was a director of research of UFO Magazine.
Correct.
I ended up being made on a merry-go-round that day on a number of different news programs, including the NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. But Brokaw wasn't there that night. Mm-hmm. Brian What's-His-Face was. Brian the Liar, whatever.
Brian Williams, yeah.
Yeah, Brian Williams was the newscaster that night. But I was down in the studios at MSNBC, and as a matter of fact, it was during the press conference with the Air Force Colonel.
Colonel Richard Weaver, yeah.
No, not Weaver.
No, not Weaver.
No, it was not Weaver.
Oh, that's right. Weaver was in September of '94 when they rolled out Mogul. So you're talking about the crash dummies, correct? In '97.
Right. And this colonel was standing up there. Now, at this point, they had not passed out their Roswell case closed report, which actually is a book. I've got one in my book stand right behind me.
I have one right in front of me that James McAndrew authored, correct?
Yeah, so at any rate, here he is going through why everybody made a big mistake, mm-hmm. And he's thumbing through the book, and he came to a photograph of a space probe, a NASA probe from 1972. And he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, well, if I were down there near De La Rosa or some damn place in Texas, and I'm driving along and I see this thing, I might pull over and get out and poke at it. But it wasn't a spacecraft. Well, and I'm thinking to myself, talk about switch and bait.
Yeah.
Here is this guy trying to pass off a space probe from 72 as something that people might have seen in 47. And then when he was talking about the anthropomorphic dummy parachute test in the mid-50s, I'm thinking to myself, my old man was in the Battle of the Bulge during World War II.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah, and I can imagine if this colonel, would have tried to convince him that, no, you weren't really at the Battle of the Bulge. This is when you were in Korea, because my old man got pulled back into the Army for Korea. And I can imagine what my dad would have done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don, we often, we use the argument because today we could use 9/11 as an example, but you and I both profoundly remember November 22nd, 1963.
Oh, yeah.
And we will for the rest of our lives. We know exactly where we were, what we were doing, and what our immediate thoughts were at that time. And neither one of us were in Dealey Plaza, I would guess. We weren't there, but yet it left such an indelible, profound, as far as effect on our very psyche, we will never forget. And to suggest that these men back in 1947, who may indeed have experienced something so totally unprecedented, the actual recovery of an alien spacecraft and its crew, and that they at any time would confuse, even the decade as to when it took place. And the other problem that the Air Force has in pronouncing, such an undefined medical condition such as time compression. There is no such thing.
Oh, my God.
No such thing in any medical book anywhere in the world. And it suggests that the people that we can document who were there at the very time that this was reported. I mean, no one cannot deny the fact that the Roswell Army Airfield put out that press release. July 8th, 1947, we've got one, ladies and gentlemen. We've captured a flying saucer. It's a matter of historic fact.
Well, look, Don, I don't know if you were in the military or not.
No, I missed it just by a matter of months with the lottery. Yeah.
But I was, and your partner, Randall,
yes.
Of course,
was
forever and ever. And I can imagine if I would have done something in my service time that would have embarrassed not only the United States Army, but the United States government, something that would have been such a profound embarrassment, what they would have done to me, and then would they have promoted me? They did to Jesse Marcel. They promoted him.
Lieutenant Colonel, correct?
Yeah, when he got out of the Army Air Force. So just looking at it, and what happened to his commanding officer at the time?
Colonel William Blanchard becomes a 4-star general by the age of 50. Unheard of.
So you see, most people today, unfortunately, have never served, and those that did serve know what I'm talking about. Right. But for these men to be lauded and promoted after they embarrassed not only their military service but the government is such hogwash.
Totally. And the idea that you're talking about something at the very least 5 years removed, when we immediately sent a statement to the Pentagon at that time, just informing them that all of the personnel regarding the recovery of bodies that we had interviewed were no longer stationed or no longer resided in New Mexico at that time. So how could it possibly have been them? Never received a response. Because
they shipped all those guys out, didn't they?
Yeah. They shipped them out, or they're constantly, reassigning and they're transferring personnel. But you are correct, Don. Many of them were reassigned immediately after the incident. They spread everybody up. Kevin and I, one of the mistakes we made early on, for example, we just naturally assumed that the MP squadron, the 1395th at that time, would have been fully involved in the recovery operation. And then to track a good number of these people down and to learn that they weren't, that they were bringing in all types of outside personnel, and they were hand-picking, they were cherry-picking, one from this unit, one from this squadron, one from this team. And the point being, it was genius on their part, because after the dust clears and they return back to their squad, they have nobody to exchange notes with. They're the sole participant. And it's the best way of really shutting down everything, because again, the rumble, that little tremor, is still echoing behind the scenes, isn't allowed to crescendo, because again, it's all been separated, it's all been split up. I mean,
let me bounce something off you,
please.
And this is something that I've been thinking about quite a bit the last couple of years. In December of 2017, former senior Senator Harry Reid held a press conference, and he admitted at the press conference that he, along with two other senators, had appropriated in excess of $20 million, about $22 million, right. Which, hey, in the scheme of things, that's not chump even change. Pocket change.
Yeah. Chump change, yeah.
But yeah, chump change, exactly. But that they fed it into the Pentagon for the aerial threat assessment study on unidentified aerial phenomena. Now,
UAPs, yeah.
Yeah, that's a real nice way of saying flying saucers.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct.
The real nice way. And then on the heels of that, we suddenly discover what transpired off the coast of California below San Diego, right, with the Nimitz carrier and battle group. Okay? The UAPs, as they were described, that were chased by Tomcat fighter jets, naval, U.S. naval aircraft chasing these things, whatever they were, along with, for God's sake, gun camera footage. Unheard of. And it was admitted that the footage was real. And then things really started to roll, Don. People suddenly realized, well, maybe this whole UAP, UFO, flying saucer thing is not crap. Maybe there is something to it. And then we hear about similar encounters off the Atlantic coast of the United States. Now, I'm watching all of this with, I got to tell you, shocked, surprised eyes. And I think back over my time chasing this phenomenon, and I had butted heads, like you, I had butted heads with people in the Pentagon.
Yes.
I butted heads with people at NASA. I butted heads with, the professional skeptic class all across the board. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, here's a guy coming out of the shadows by the name of Christopher Mellon.
Correct.
A former Undersecretary of State for Intelligence, things like the DIA and the Pentagon and other intelligence services connected with that, who is talking not only a pro, and I'm going to use the term UFO because that's the one I'm really comfortable with, a pro UFO guy from that rarefied atmosphere. And I'm watching all of this with amazement, and I could feel, and I'm sure you could too, a sea change. But you know who never as much as uttered one sound, and this is what I'm getting at, and I want to get your response. The U.S. Air Force never said a bloody damned word.
Exactly. And, for as long as we've worked on this, and you mentioned even the Pentagon, and Kevin Rando and I actually met with Colonel Richard Mitchell at the Pentagon, who was head of Army intelligence at that time. And we had to even meet outside of his office in private because he was even concerned that we were being listened to. Well, anyway, we were hearing more and more that there's this growing, level of concern within the military, that not only was the old order not passing it down to the new, but that all the new officers really wanted this to come out, that they felt that they were left in the dark. They felt that if they indeed needed to confront and deal with something that may be potentially a national threat, that they had their hands tied and they didn't know where to go. And so one of the theories that we've even addressed is the possibility that here the Air Force has served as, the arbiter of all UFO, all things, UFO related, that type of thing. And with the three projects, Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book, and then all the subsequent reports, related to Project Stork and Twinkle and all that, the idea that when Blue Book was finally declassified in 1977 during the Carter administration, one of the first things we observed was, where are all the Navy reports? Where are all the Marine reports? Where are the Army reports? Roswell, for example, there was an Army incident. When Sheila Windhall, for example, who was Secretary of the Air Force in 1994, during Colonel Richard Weaver's press conference at the Pentagon, where they came out with their new theory, Project Mogul. And it stated in the report that the Secretary of the Air Force is absolving all military personnel of their security oaths regarding the matter. Well, what nobody was picking up on the fact is, first of all, there was no Air Force in 1947. It had yet to split off. So this was an Army incident. So how does the Air Force absolve the Army of security oaths? So that was the red herring at that time. So the point being that we know that the Navy is sitting on a plethora, just a mountain of case reports, of pilot incidents, of just imagine as far as their global coverage, well beyond anything that, our Air Force in, maintaining sovereign airspace, that type of thing, that they're very limited. Whereas our Navy is covering, the oceans of the world. So one of the theories is that the Navy is finally fed up. They finally said enough of the Air Force, because we know, you and I both realize that they're very much in competition with one another. I think that was quite evidenced with General Norman Schwarzkopf, the late General Schwarzkopf, during Desert Storm. And here was Schwarzkopf as far as representing the Army. and at a press conference, he lamented the fact that we're not on the same page. We don't know that when the Navy is lobbing the Tomahawks into Baghdad, we don't know what their schedule is. And with the Air Force, with the F-117s and the F-17s at that time, we have no idea when they're announcing that they have full air supremacy. What the hell is going on? We don't know if we should be marching into Baghdad or what's going on. So it was a clear demonstration that one branch doesn't know what the other branch is doing.
Well, by 2001, Don, that had not changed.
Right.
When the Twin Towers were hit and the Pentagon was hit, the CIA and the FBI, the two organizations that should have been in the very closest of support, weren't even talking to each other.
Exactly. I know. And so for this situation now, I can't imagine that it's the Navy is cooperating with the Air Force. I think the Air Force is sitting there now after almost 77 years of just total cover-up on this subject, that who would believe them even if they were to acknowledge it? And the point being that the Navy, for having now their best pilots, and I can assure you, and I mean nothing personal against any Air Force personnel, but I've always been of the opinion that the best pilots in the world are the U.S. Navy, not the Air Force.
Well, I'll tell you what, let us pick it up there. We're at our very first breakdown. And let's take that break, get it out of the way, and then we can continue on. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dark Matters Radio, brought to you exclusively by KGRA Radio, where KGRA takes a look in those dusty, often neglected corners. My guest tonight, my very special guest, longtime colleague, associate, Mr. Donald R. Schmitt. And we got a lot more coming up. Stick around.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat.
Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com. Or to speak with a trained consultant, give Angioprim a call at 954-882-7221. That's 954-882-7221.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied, but you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with, you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
This is Bill Skywatcher, producer for the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station. For a limited time only, save over 30% for life with full access to all content, and the offer expires March 31st, 2021. The current price is $3.99. It's going to go up, folks. So lock in that $3.99 price for life. You'll have till March 31st, 2021 to do it. So go to kgradb.com and make sure to subscribe now before the offer ends March 31st, 2021. Hope you enjoy the website, everybody, and you all enjoy kgradb.com.
We are the contact for alternative research topics. The Planet, kgraradio.com.
And we're back with tonight's very special guest, Mr. Donald R. Schmitt. Don and I go back a long, long ways. Hell, Don, come to think of it, anybody I know in this field, I go back with a long, long way.
Yeah.
Hey, well, you know, we were talking about the Navy and the United States Air Force, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force. And this is a story. It's a short little story. You probably are aware of it, but it's one I love to tell. Talk about service rivalry. So along about 1952, 53, somewhere in there, in that time frame, the Secretary of the Navy was on a fact-finding tour out in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And of course, Pearl Harbor was the site of the surprise Japanese attack, which basically propelled the United States into World War II. And they were very sensitive about that in the 50s. I mean, here we were once again, only 5 years after the end of World War II, we were in another shooting war in Asia, in Korea. So on the way back, he's flying over Konus, the United States, that's the mainland, and his aircraft was buzzed by a UFO. Are you aware of this, Don?
Yes. And
well, he gets back to D.C., and of course this guy, you can imagine, the Secretary of the freaking Navy, on a fact-finding tour to Pearl Harbor, and his aircraft is buzzed by this unknown aerial object. So the first thing he does, because, hey, remember, this is right after the Washington, D.C. overflights where the military, the Pentagon, they didn't know if they were going to be invaded by, creatures from outer space. Nobody had a clue.
No, exactly.
He calls up the Secretary of the Air Force. He says, hey, you're not going to believe this. He said, this is what happened. And he told him, and he said, what are you guys sitting on with this? And you know what the Secretary of the Air Force told the Secretary of the Navy? You don't have a need to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this guy, can you imagine? Here's one of these guys. It's at the top of the pinnacle. His brother secretary just told him to go pound sand. So now, okay, the Air Force was originally a part of the Army.
Right.
The Army and the Navy have traditionally been at loggerheads forever. Okay, it's just part of the game. The Navy and the Marine Corps hated the Army. The Army hated the Navy and the Marine Corps. And you'd go on Liberty to a bar somewhere, and if you had sailors
we go back in World War II, even the rivalry, the competition between Eisenhower with the Army and Kurt LeMay with the Air Force, with the Army Air Corps. And as far as the finality of World War II, who was going to go into Berlin first? That they were even debating that between the two branches.
Right. Well, anyway, so the Navy, this is one thing that a lot of people may not know, but the U.S. Navy has an intelligence service that is second to nobody. They've been at it well over a century, okay? They got their ducks all lined up. And as you mentioned earlier, Don, God only knows what they have collected and been sitting on.
Right.
And I kind of saw what they did maybe in part sticking their thumb in the Air Force's eye.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, that's why I set it up the way I did, because I would like to believe that, see, the Air Force, as far as I'm concerned, they've had 75 years of just total subterfuge, obfuscation. They've done everything they can to deceive, the general public, and they've gone to extreme lengths in, as far as preventing citizens, American, civilians from being provided due process. They've threatened people into submission. They've threatened children if they wouldn't inform on their very parents on a topic that they would say, doesn't even exist. And yet the Navy has been sitting back and just very, very, very disciplined, very much to themselves, but slowly collecting and investigating 75 years of a phenomenon that, as far as from all indications, they're either preparing to break what they know or let it trickle out incrementally, soften the blow, and let's see how the public responds. But I would agree with you in that the Navy is certainly in the best position right now to come clean. Because again, I wouldn't believe a word if the Air Force would acknowledge, yeah, we got the Roswell craft and we're reverse engineering it, and we got Will Schmitt, he's going to come and pilot it, an Independence Day for us, that type of thing. Wouldn't believe it. The Navy, much higher credibility as far as in my eyes.
Well, here is something that I'm going to be very interested in getting your response to. I'm sure that you watched with appreciation that series that ran 2 seasons on the History Channel, Unidentified.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, I've talked to a couple of those guys that were in that program on screen. And I mentioned one thing I picked up upon immediately, Don. Every episode that they ran with that, regardless of what they were talking about, they had one constant drumbeat, a possible threat, threat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I looked at that. When I was in the Army in Vietnam, I was involved with military intelligence and gathering, we were using various means and methods for what we were doing. And one thing that I recognized almost immediately, either these guys have an inkling of something that may be coming down the road at us. And if it gets here, and once it gets here, there's no way in heaven or hell that they can deny it. Or,
right.
Number 2, this is one of the world's biggest dog and pony disinformation programs ever. What do you think about that?
For example, we have to keep in mind Luis Elizondo for having headed the program for all those years. I would maintain that, first of all, I'm sure he still has a security oath. And I'm sure that they also keep him on a very short leash for that reason. I think he's waved a lot of carrots, suggesting that, especially when he alludes to the fact that they have physical evidence. Well, in my case, the first impression is, well, of course, Roswell. You have wreckage from an actual crash retrieval dating back to 1947. But they're never so specific. They tease us with what they believe we have or that the government is in possession of. But then it still comes back to, and we discussed this earlier, Don, when I'm asked, for example, where do you think, if they indeed do have physical evidence, where is it today? And I quite frankly, I respond, Don, by saying the government doesn't have it. The military doesn't have it. I'm convinced that it's all within the private sector. In other words, that because the military / government doesn't manufacture a single plane, tank, ship, gun for that matter, everything is contracted out to the private sector. And as a result, Is it a matter of they've lost control, that a lot of the answers that they sought were never given back, were never provided? And they find the military right now, in many respects, finds themselves just as much in the dark as we are, because they're trying to put the genie back in the box, so to speak. And they've lost as far as that control. And I think that the Navy, because they played it smartly, they weren't public. They didn't have a public, investigation such as the Air Force. They weren't having press conferences where they needed to address the media's concerns as to whether they were being upfront, disclosing, the truth as they knew it at the time. And the Navy could just sit back and quietly investigate, their own experiences and compile everything to the point that they would draw certain conclusions. And let's hope that, again, this is going to be a harbinger of what lies ahead, that within our lifetimes, you and I, that we're going to have, some disclosure, even if it's with a small d. And I'd like to believe that the Navy is going to spearhead it this time.
Well, I have no doubt that you are absolutely 1,000% correct about the material in the private sector. And if for no other reason, about 2 years ago, when the story broke on the Admiral Thomas Wilson and Dr. What the hell now? His name just skipped my mind.
I know what you mean, too.
Yeah. Well, at any rate.
Yes.
When that story broke, I began digging around, doing so. I was fascinated by what I was hearing. Okay. I was truly fascinated. And I started doing, I was a detective once upon a time.
Oh, yes. And I compliment you to no end. In my eyes, you are a true hero for all that, Don, and especially the price you personally paid. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. There's no need for that. But anyway, I started tracking down the trail of what had been alleged to have transpired. Now, back in the 90s, Billy Cox, reporter for the Sarasota Herald, who incidentally is going to be my guest next week. For 15 years or more, he ran the UFO blog.
Right.
And he was instrumental in the one guy that was a legitimate, genuine journalist that pursued this phenomenon and always did his reporting right up front. He was involved in this because he knew Edgar Mitchell. Mitchell, of course, the sixth man to walk on the moon, came back, created quite a bit of buzz at the time about his psi experiments coming back from the moon.
Right.
And other things. And he was always very upfront. Edgar Mitchell was very upfront about his belief that, yes, Earth has been visited. They very well may be here now, and so forth. And he was, because of who he was, he had been digging around in officialdom for a long time, had been in touch with Admiral Wilson, who at that point was in charge and the director of the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. And there were a lot in this mix, but the ultimate thing was Eric Davis is who I was trying to think of.
That's right. Who's very difficult to get a hold of.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, he sure is. Well loved among his colleagues, too, I might add. But at any rate, he had been part of Bigelow's organization when they were involved with Skinwalker Ranch.
That's correct. Well, and Bigelow bought the ranch, yeah.
Yeah. He had been involved in that, very closed-mouthed. And at any rate, so the story goes, and apparently I happen to believe it's true, Davis arranged to have a meeting with Wilson over in Las Vegas in a parked car.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, knowing a little bit about, investigations, criminal investigations, and what have you, every good investigator has a pocket recorder of some type. And the only way that we could have gotten the complete alleged document that came from Eric Davis that ended up in Edgar Mitchell's effects, and after Mitchell died, they became public knowledge, is if Davis would have recorded his conversation. And according to the meat of the subject is, Wilson became convinced to try to track down what information was in the Pentagon about UFOs. And he finally was able to contact an aerospace company out here in California. I happen to have my own personal favorite of which company it was, but they had a secure vault. He flew out to meet with them. They took him into the secure vault. He said, okay, here I am, guys. I'm not only an admiral, and this is for effect, ladies and gentlemen, but I head up the DIA. What do you guys got? And they shut him out entirely. You, Admiral, don't have a need to know. Now, I get sick of hearing that, Don. How about you?
Yeah. In fact, I could tell a similar story that when Dr. Hynek, my scientific director, had just finished with Project Blue Book, and it was the first time that Donald Rumsfeld had served as Secretary of Defense, and I was with the Ford administration. And then after that, he served as far as Secretary of Defense with George W. Bush presidency. But anyway, Hynek happened to be in Washington on one occasion. And the reason that he knew of Rumsfeld in advance was because when Hynek testified during the congressional hearings, the short-lived hearings in Washington in 1966, who would introduce him on the floor of the House of Representatives but his own congressional representative, Donald Rumsfeld, and in the most glowing of terms. So Hynek was doing nothing more than just visiting, his own district congressman and hoping that he'd have, an opportunity to actually speak with him concerning his Blue Book Association. So Hynek sits down with Rumsfeld right in his office. And we know this because Hynek himself told us this. And the point being that Hynek was lamenting the fact that, I've given you guys 19 years of my life, and you've given me nothing in return. I was promised access to the data. I was promised as far as that you would permit me to speak to pilots that I was denied. I would come and provide you as far as with case reports and expect to see investigations, and nothing ever took place. Everything was always swept under the carpet. I believe you owe me. I believe you have the right to tell me. And Hynek described how Rumsfeld got up from behind his desk, walked over, looked down at him, pointed his finger in his face, and went, "You have no right to know." So it's become an old catchphrase because it immediately ends the discussion. It shuts you down. And without any, room for debate, it's basically, I lord over you. You will do exactly as I say because you are beneath me and have no right to know what I... So the point being, there obviously is something to know. It's just that we don't have the right to know it.
I'll tell you, for a long time, and this comes from well over 30 years of swimming through this sewage. Mm-hmm. I've come to believe that it's very, very likely that at least some of those visitors, the very human appearing visitors, are here walking amongst us.
Yes.
Have you ever considered that, Don?
Oh, yes. In fact, if we consider the entire concept of the abduction scenario, the idea and the descriptions of what appeared to be the creation of a hybrid race, one would then, well, what would be the next phase? And then one would believe, well, the slow assimilation into our very society. The idea that, and you and I, we've seen people, we witness people, and we look at them and go, God, do they look odd? They don't look even human to some aspect because, maybe a very pronounced forehead or a larger cranium, that type of thing. And they just don't look right. And not that I immediately, well, it must be, one of them, that type of thing. But I have no problem because the idea that, we most likely would attempt to do the same thing, that if we have a long-term, as far as observational project here on planet Earth, one of the things that, we would anticipate is that they would, live amongst us. They would interact. They would, try to comprehend and understand why we think and why we do the way what we do. It's almost like the Klaatu, the Michael Rennie character in The Day the Earth Stood Still, and that when he escaped from Bethesda Hospital, that the one thing he wanted to do was, join the human ranks. He wanted to see again why we behaved the way we did. So it's an old age concept, the idea that even ancient aliens, the idea that we've had help, we've had these benefactors for centuries that have stepped forward and taken us by the hand. And I like to think that that's the case, that at times they nudge us in the right direction, because God knows that the human species has a long history of self-destruction.
Well, during my lifetime, at any rate, and your lifetime, the number of people seeing unusual sights in the air and sometimes on the ground, and although it's not often mentioned, in some cases it is, but UFOs or unknown objects under the sea, I've kind of thought, I wonder, Don, if we are just on an off-ramp from the interstellar highway, if you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like to joke that we're either the galactic zoo, or as the late John Keel had even suggested, and before him, even Carl Jung, that we may be the universal insane asylum. That's a sobering thought.
A few years ago, there was a remake of a late 1970s science fiction show, Battlestar Galactica.
Yes, Richard Hatch. Yeah.
Yeah, and the remake was far, far superior.
Mm-hmm.
And I often wondered, what if all of those survivors would have been survivors from a penal colony or
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
prison, but they managed to get out, and ultimately they settled on what today we call our planet Earth. Kind of like Australia, right?
Well, right. And then if you look at like Elon Musk, or even like Richard Branson and some of the Joe Firmage and others, even Jacques Vallée, the plans, the talk as far as the manned mission to Mars, and then the colonization of even the moon, and then beyond that Mars and so on. The very thought that we have to vacate, we got to get out of here. That if for the human species to continue, it's going to have to leave planet Earth. And it's like, what do they know? Or are we invited? Or why don't we take care of business here? Given as far as just the very thought of, living out the rest of one's life on a planet as barren as Mars and as cold and desolate as the moon, that type of thing.
Well, yeah, I do not understand right now the idea of sending humans to Mars if they intend to stay there. Okay,
right.
The logistical support to maintain, at least initially, a base on Mars would be humongous.
Oh,
and even getting there, getting resupplied, and suppose somebody was seriously hurt or injured. I mean, how in the heck can they get the needed medical care and what? I mean, it almost seems insurmountable. Now, with more technology, I think, we can eventually do it. But I sure wouldn't want to go to Mars now.
No. But yet, if you think back, the fact that we really haven't been back to the moon now, or at least as we know, in the past 50 years, that what if the Apollo program and whatever program even beyond the shuttle would have continued unabated? That and we both remember that as far as with the space race to the moon during the Kennedy administration, that the plans were that we were to be on the moon by 1970, and then we were to be on Mars by 1980. That's how gung-ho, that's how vibrant the
Well, Don, I know that you are aware of my lunar research.
Oh, yes.
And I have my own ideas on why we weren't going back to the moon, why we haven't been back to the moon. And the Clementine mission,
right.
A friend of mine, Dr. John Brandenburg, was the assistant to the administrator there. And I mean, how many people today are aware that they completely, totally rephotographed the moon in the mid-1990s?
Right.
Over 2 million photographs. How many have we seen out of those 2 million photographs?
Well, nothing public, nothing as far as released, as far as I would imagine certain people within the scientific community. And I'd like to believe, at least, you consider how often the Pentagon was leasing the shuttle. And
that whole Clementine thing was a DOD mission anyway. Hey, look, I'm looking at the clock, Don. We're going to have to pick up when we get back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the top of the hour. Tonight's guest, Mr. Donald R. Schmitt. And, hey, we got a heck of a lot more coming up, believe me. Don, when we come back, let us revisit the early 1990s. This is Dark Matters Radio. And we'll be back. Stick around.
When you're in the house for longer periods of time, you can see them flying or running across the floor. Ooh, yuck. They're unhealthy, gross, and disgusting. Bugs. I loathe bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. On contact, it kills hidden bugs, including ants, roaches, and fleas. Plus, Orange Guard is a residual repellent. All of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally recognized as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard. Available at orangeguard.com, Whole Foods, and Ace Hardware.
Please listen. Now is not the time to fear. When your immune system is strong, shields up. You have very little worries. If your immune system is compromised, you're susceptible to all viruses. I say shields up and no fear. Try Heart Love from GetTheTea.com. Heart Love has a special ingredient called allicin. It comes from the healing part of the garlic plant. No garlic breath. No garlic leaking out your pores, just pure immune-building ingredients that gets your shields up. Heart Love is a unique blend of herbs that loves to build you up. Google garlic and know the benefits. One Heart Love pill is equal to 20 cloves of garlic. 20 cloves! Shields up. You've heard of our Life Change Cleansing Tea at GetTheTea.com. Now try Heart Love. And by the way, take your blood pressure and watch weekly what happens. So here's how to purchase. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. And build your shields. That's GetTheTea.com. Mention Ray in the coupon code and hit apply and receive free shipping.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRAradio.com.
And we are back with hour number 2 with my very special guest tonight, Mr. Don Schmitt. Don, we had to break off. We were talking about the space operation that the United States conducted. We lost under Obama, the Obama administration. He shut down the shuttles. NASA is continuously being budget slashed. Although I don't know about the last several years. I mean, we've been spending money like a drunken sailor. And by the way, any ex-sailors out there, I mean, nothing personally, right, but on a drunken sailor on a night on the town. But even the Clementine mission was DOD. And I think DOD is pumping money into everything these days, isn't it?
Well, then we consider as far as the whole black operation situation, and who knows how much of that has involved space exploration. And as far as projects, we talked about as often as the shuttle was leased by the Pentagon for who knows what. And I would imagine much of it involved as far as the launching of military satellites, for example. And I know the whole triangulation between us and Northern England with the NSA facility there in Australia, and the triangulation with the particle beam and laser projection and taking out, enemy satellites, that type of thing. I'm sure much of that was arranged and orchestrated with the approval of NASA at that time, or at least the cooperation.
Well, can you imagine during the Obama years, we could not even get an astronaut into orbit.
Exactly.
Unless it was on a Russian ship.
Precisely. And I, for one, was personally embarrassed. And that was when I was originally bringing up the fact that, just imagine, again, if the programs would have continued unabated up till today. And we talk about the spin-off technology that most people, I'd like to believe, are aware of, that even within our own modern cars, much of that technology is a result of the space program. And so just imagine where we might all be today.
How do you think, now this is speculation, but how do you think the space program will fare under the Biden administration?
Well, we know where it was, what direction it was going into as far as with the Trump administration. What I'm personally concerned about more is of an EMP attack, something that would take out our electric grid and paralyze the country for not only months, but possibly years, essentially take us back to the Stone Age in many respects. And the fact that we haven't hardened that as far as it's one thing to be able to shoot a bullet out of the sky with another missile, so to speak. But the idea that we haven't created a more of a dome protection that will prevent an electromagnetic pulse from totally destroying as far as our entire society as we know it.
Well, people don't realize, but if God forbid that were to happen, we would have, in this nation, the United States, millions with an M dead.
The city, every major city in this country would be in the midst of total anarchy. It would be just unbelievable. We talk about as far as the shelves of every grocery store within a community being empty within hours, if such a thing should ever take place. And the fact that, again, that our public officials give us the impression that, well, there's nothing to worry about, nothing to see here because it can't happen. Well, I'm sorry. All it takes is just a very strategically placed nuclear detonation, and it will wipe out the entire electrical grid.
Yeah, that would be it would be a nightmare, totally. Okay, let's take a little time trip back to the latter 1980s and come forward. Now, at that time, you and Randall were working all the time diligently on the Roswell event, right?
Since beginning of 1989, correct.
Well, there was a heck of a lot happening then. There was in 86, the news broke the story on the Japan Airlines 747 in the skies above Alaska encountering a monstrously sized something. Okay, UFO. Got it.
A carrier. Just imagine the size of a Navy carrier. Unbelievable.
Big, very big. And on the heels of that, Gulf Breeze. The Gulf Breeze event. And
Florida, correct.
Let's throw a screwball into the mix. Then George Knapp out of KLAS Television 8 in Las Vegas broke the Robert Lazar Area 51 Site S4 story.
That's correct.
Now, to say that suddenly the world sat up and noticed UFOs would be an understatement, and then a hell of a lot more. In 1991, on Larry King Live, I broke the story of the Soviet Union's Phobos 2 encounter with a huge something in Mars orbit.
That's correct.
And roughly 6 months later, the STS-48 shuttle video. And Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs every week were on TV talking about alleged alien abductions. There were so many things going on, and if you turned on the TV coast to coast, every week there would be 10, 12, maybe more programs dealing with some aspect of the UFO phenomenon. That was basically the tail that wagged the dog for a long time, wasn't it, Don?
Absolutely. I was averaging at that time 6 interviews a day after our first book came out on Roswell in 1991. And leading up to even the 50th anniversary, I did over 300 interviews over the course of 3 days at the 50th. And so it was a period of where there was high hope within the UFO ranks, as well as the media thinking that we need to come up to speed on this topic because we've also been kept in the dark. And, we're supposed to be the watchdogs at the gate, so to speak. And we're talking potentially the biggest story of the millennium. And we know next to nothing about this. So fortunately, they were coming to us for the answers. They weren't going to the Phil Classes and the James Olbergs so much as they were coming to us because we could provide them with the best cases and invite them. Check it out yourself. Look into it yourself. You guys have unlimited funding. Go after these stories. You're going to find out that you've been, misled and deceived about this subject for 50 years at that time.
And it was making waves all over the radio. Now, way back in the 50s and the 60s, there was a guy on radio, originally out of New York, I believe it was WOR, who went by the moniker Long John Neville.
Long John Neville, who started it all, yes.
And he was well, he would keep them up until the wee hours of the morning with his program. And he did straight UFO reporting, and then he had a lot of the, shall we say, to be polite, more colorful characters.
The contactees, the George Adamskis and Howard Mengers, and those that would claim actual contact with space brothers, from within our own solar system.
Exactly. and after Long John died, his wife that he had married, who had been a model, and a lot of weird stories swirled about her, Candy Jones, because at one point a book came out about Candy Jones that suggested she was a CIA sleeper agent who had been mind controlled, maybe even an assassin.
Right.
But, and then it kind of died away. Then in 79, 80, Bill Moore and Charlie Berlitz came out with their Roswell book, and slowly things started to build up. Well, in the 80s, the latter 80s, there was a show that bounced out of Las Vegas. And no, I'm not talking about Art Bell. I'm talking about a guy by the name of Billy Goodman.
Yes.
And Goodman absolutely wild, and this is what caused him to go worldwide, as best as could be done then. People were taping his show, copying it, sending it around. He got an exclusive with Bob Lazar and Lazar's buddy Gene Huff, who made the first of several appearances. And boy, it really took off. Well, I started my broadcasting in 91. And at that time, Art Bell, who soon was to take the helm of Coast to Coast, was still doing political talk radio.
Mm-hmm.
But when Bell hit, buddy, he hit big.
Yes.
And all of this was happening. And then in late 94, I got a call at UFO Magazine from, of all places, Walt Disney World down in Orlando, Florida. Now, the Disney people, kind of bounced on me. Well, we've got this brand new attraction that we're getting ready to launch. It's called the Extraterrestrial attraction. And we want to put on a 2-week UFO symposium at Disney. And would you be interested? Well, I said, that's why I have a manager. So I put them in touch with my manager. Well, to make a long story short, she got back to me and said, you should do it. So I started calling whom I considered to be the top researchers at the time. And Mr. Don Schmitt and Mr. Kevin Randall were two that I got in touch with. Now, Randall was there for the first week. Don was there for the second week, along with a lot of other people.
Correct.
Don, why don't you tell everybody your experience from that time forward?
Well, it was a novel situation, as you even set it up, Don, in that we thought we were to be present for a press conference. I thought we'd have more reporters than we did, but nonetheless, we felt we were there all for the purpose of promoting this new George Lucas exhibit, this alien encounter, display, this ride, whatever you want to call it. And I found that we were being pulled by a lot of the reporters who had other venues. I know I did a radio show out of Orlando that evening with two of the ladies who were there as abductees. And little did we realize that it was a shock radio format. and they made the mistake of saying something very rude, very crude to one of the young ladies. And I'm glad my father, former Army drill sergeant, raised me correctly, because I immediately stepped to their defense. And they barely got a word in for the rest of the interview as far as the two hosts. So, but Disney had nothing to do with that. They just provided me with that opportunity. But what surprised me was after we had a few days of VIP treatment as far as at the park, we're told that, the very last day, we'd like to do some interviews. We're doing this documentary. And the moment I heard that, I thought to myself, well, we had heard these rumors that Walt Disney himself had been approached at that time, 40 years ago, about doing something on the subject of UFOs, that the Pentagon wanted to have something in the can. They needed to have something at the ready in the event that something out of their control would transpire. And when you think back, during our own lifetimes, one would have been hard-pressed to name anyone else who symbolized, not only the American dream, but also the American way of life better than Walt Disney. Parents didn't have to worry about the impression a Disney production would leave on their children. And Disney had a greater influence and lasting impression on many of the children during World War II and thereafter. So to me, it made sense that maybe it was finally going to happen. But what surprised me, Don, is that you weren't informed about this. You weren't involved. That they essentially just used you to pull us all together, bring us all down to Orlando for this press conference. And then there we are in the midst of these interviews for this future documentary. So,
well, not only did they not advise me, they froze me out. Nobody from that production team even as much as said hello to me.
So it was a question of, did they feel that as long as you had plausible deniability, that you could play dumb for any one of us who would have said, well, that's not why we're here, or why are you blindsiding us, as far as with a documentary, to be interviewed, that type of thing. I don't believe it was that they were just protecting you, but I think they used you more than anything, just essentially fish for, as you described, the better people in the field. And you took it upon yourself to put it all together, and it essentially did their work for them in many respects.
Well, yeah. Now, I don't remember if you will remember, but the last night there, we had a big dinner. Do you recall that?
Yes, yeah. It was a grand.
And, now, like I said, I ended up, and a lot of people may not know this, they probably are thinking, boy, I'll bet you Ecker made a nice buck there. Actually, I didn't make a nickel, not a nickel there. They did not pay me monetarily. I did not receive a salary, huh?
And that does not surprise me. And I can honestly tell you, Don, not once did I ever think that or believe or even conclude that. And I can honestly say, for all of my discussion with those present and even thereafter, I never heard anyone allude to that, suggest that.
Well, that's the simple fact of the matter.
Right.
My manager told me that they weren't offering a salary, but that if I did a good job for them, then they would perhaps use me down the road, which of course never happened. But anyway, here we are at this dinner, and in the middle of the dinner, a Disney kid, a drone, came running up to the table and said, words to the effect of, Mr. Ecker, we have something we want to give you. Would you follow me, please? And we walked out into a dark hallway. And there was the guy that had been in charge of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And another kid came running up the hall, handed a cardboard box to this guy, and he pulled out a statue of Mickey Mouse, and he said, well, we want to thank you for a great job you did. And he handed me this, and he said, this is our Disney Oscar.
Yeah.
We call it a Moscar.
Mm-hmm. Oscar.
And they all left. Now I'm standing there holding this dumb-looking thing, and I walked back into the dinner, and I thought, you know what? Excuse my French, but what a shitty job that was. Why didn't he do that in front of the seated guests?
Precisely. As though they themselves realized that it was more of a token gesture and more embarrassing than anything else.
Oh, well, at any rate, I am working on a paper that I'm going to lay out this entire unbelievable foray into absurdity, Don. This was just
the fact that you yourself were not interviewed, were not included. The fact that, and as we know the history, as we anticipated that there would be some fanfare. I mean, here was a Disney production. I mean, it was the Walt Disney Company Presents, which, it isn't taken, very lightheartedly. I mean, they're putting their stamp of approval on a subject that they, at least by every indication, they may have been approached, as we know they were with Ward Kimball back in the mid-50s. But we had high hopes that this would be a groundbreaker, as you have been setting this up, Don. The fact that this was during a time period that we were on a fast track, that UFOs were almost in the news on a regular basis at this time, and it was as though Disney was now trying to capitalize on it. And we do this documentary through the course of a couple days, filming these interviews. And when I finished, I see an entourage of all these security people arriving. And my first impression is, well, obviously it's somebody very important. And then I thought to myself, my God, I wonder if it's the CEO. I wonder if it's the very president of Disney, Michael Eisner himself. And it was. And as I'm sure we'll get into it, the fact that who introduces the very program, the very documentary, but Michael Eisner himself. So,
well, here's what I thought about that, Don. Number one, this was way, way prior to the internet as we know it.
Yes.
The internet, well, it was kind of there. I mean, you had America Online, you had a couple other services, but to go up on the web, per se, go to somebody's website, exchange information, all that type of thing, that was all in the future. Okay? For the most part, it was in the future. What mainly ruled the roost then were BBS's, bulletin board services.
Right.
So, and I thought about that. As a matter of fact, I spent literally off and on years thinking about it. And what could that possibly have been about? Because what we haven't yet mentioned on this is for 2 weeks, I had the cream of the UFO researcher cream at Disney. And the most highly attended day in an auditorium where we were that could have seated several hundred people.
Right.
Okay. There was no attendees.
Right.
No attendees. The most highly rated day, we might have had 10 or 12. Now, I got to say, I was shocked and I was appalled. But then as I was to discover, here was Disney that flew in all these people for 2 weeks, put them up in their resort hotel, fed them, okay, gave them VIP passes. They could go anywhere in the park as a VIP attendee, do anything they wanted to do, okay? But Disney never paid 1 red cent to promote this. And nobody knew it was there.
Nobody knew it was there. Right, right. And for being there the second week, the fact that the exhibit was not even functioning. That here we were supposed to be, present for the grand unveiling, and they weren't even ready.
Well, when they shot this documentary, it was given a prelude by none other than Michael Eisner.
Right.
He basically said on the video, if you see it or if you've seen it, that this is all real.
Right, right, right.
This is real. UFOs are real. ETs are real. And Disney is putting this attraction here, and that was part of the attraction for me because I and all the other attendees were supposed to have a prelude, be allowed to go into this to experience it. But Eisner came down and said no.
Right, right.
He shut it down. He would not allow us to go in there. And then when this thing is done, narrated by Robert Urich, okay, remember Spencer?
Spencer for Hire.
The private detective with Robert Urich. Great show.
Yes.
He was the guy that narrated the whole thing. And Don, when did they air it? How did they air it?
Well, you even mentioning Robert Urich, I wrote this down from years ago because I couldn't believe that he actually was making this statement. So if I may just quickly quote Robert Urich at the beginning of the program. He says, quote, "For nearly 50 years, officials have been documenting routine alien encounters here on planet Earth, and thousands of people have experienced this alien presence. Yet, many others refuse to acknowledge the obvious evidence all around them." End quote. Well, can you tell me the last time we've ever been involved with a documentary that they actually made such a definitive statement before?
And then somebody with the stature of Eisner at the time, basically saying it's all true.
It's all true. So here we are anticipating that, it's going to be this big splash, big broadcast on Disney. Well, it doesn't premiere on Disney. In fact, it never even aired on Disney. It airs on one of Ted Turner's. It was either TBS or TNT. And late at night, when the viewership is next to nothing. So it was a total disappointment. And then the fact that it did not re-air, that there was no repeat broadcast. So it's like somebody quickly put the kibosh on this, as though somebody had pre-screened what was being, presented and said, I can't imagine that Eisner got cold feet. I can't imagine that, any other officials at Disney for having, hired out. And I checked because as we both know, these companies will typically hire out an outside production company. And it was called Thomas and Friends in Burbank at that time. And the very fact that it was a gentleman by the name of Andy Thomas who wrote the script, who produced, directed, and edited the entire program. So I'm sure, they shopped. They didn't just bid this out. I'm sure they worked with somebody. And then I'd like to believe that they had final script approval, because Eisner was most likely reading from cue cards, and we know that Bob Urich was reading from a script. And the point being that it's presented, the opening says, the Walt Disney Company presents. That's the point. It was presented by Walt Disney Productions, and it did not even air on the Disney Channel.
Well, as I had said many times now, okay, in recent times, with all my thinking about this fiasco, I don't for 1 second believe, and somebody just mentioned this to me, well, maybe it was whoever was at Disney, just really screwed up letting the public know about this, doing a promo. And I said, Disney? My God, there's no more savvy media company in the world than Walt Disney. I said, if you were one of the execs there that screwed up something as badly as this apparently was, that guy would be out, quite frankly, on his ass before you could blink.
And probably blacklisted for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Exactly. So what could it be? Well, to me, there was only one possibility. Somebody in the hierarchy with quote-unquote military intelligence wanted to know what the cream of the crop in 1995 were talking about, researching and discussing among themselves. It was an intelligence dog and pony show. That's what I think. Don?
I think you're certainly on the right track, Don. We had talked about the notion that this was a fishing expedition, that they were more concerned about what we could provide them as far as information than what they could provide or present to the general public. It was as though it was a fact-finding mission on someone's part. And what more, innocuous, what more innocent venue than Walt Disney, Disneyland, that we would be there for a George Lucas, exhibit, unveiling. And, oh, by the way, as long as you're here, we would just like to interview you.
Now, what the hell was that about, though? Because if this was Disney, they are not known for screwing the pooch like this was screwing the pooch. Who made money on this, Don? They didn't. They poured it down a black hole, or somebody poured it down a black hole. It didn't
come out on video. It didn't come out later as far as DVD. Only place you can see it right now is on YouTube, and I believe it's from a foreign source that even, put it there. So they couldn't have made dime one, and the point is they would have had to pay production, and they certainly had to, pay Bob Urich.
Have you ever known Disney to allow any copyrighted video to go up on YouTube?
No.
And they've never said a bloody word about this, have they?
No. And in fact, when I checked just before we went on the air, over 1.25 million people have viewed the documentary on YouTube. When you consider how many watched it when it was actually premiered on television, they should be collecting now for YouTube subscribers.
Well, this is one of my personal great mysteries of my lifetime, Don.
Well, I think you need to. We talked about Eisner would still be available. And I think this Andy Thomas, whose production company was hired by Disney.
Ahead of you, buddy.
He's in Pasadena, correct?
Ahead of you.
Very good. Very good. So he should be able to. What was his mission? What was his assignment? Who did he answer to?
Yeah, well, that's one thing that I never met him. He never met me. I don't even know if he was aware of my existence when all this went down.
Most likely not. I don't see anything in his background that would suggest he knew about any one of us, because he really has no prior background as far as on the subject.
So now let's shoot forward. What in the heck have you been up to? I know you and Tom Carey have been working together through the years. Do you guys have anything happening right now? I know this COVID thing has really thrown a monkey wrench into the gear work.
Well, that it has. And I was part of that History Channel, Roswell, the First Witness, that aired for those 3 weekends in December, with the Jesse Marcel logbook, the diary analysis, and some of the additional testing at the Roswell debris field from 1947, that type of thing. And we had wrapped up shooting in January of last year. And we ran into the whole COVID shutdown, and we still had a lot of airtime to film. And so I was amazed that they were still able to put together enough material to fill 6 hours. So we haven't heard anything about a second season as of yet, because I don't think they know how they would even go into any production.
Well, I gotta tell you, I never would have believed last year that this crap would still be ongoing right now.
No, I don't think any one of us did. I think, for example, our museum in Roswell, we're really only open at 25%. And this is the longest stretch we've been open for almost a year. We'd be open for a couple of weeks, they'd shut us down again. We'd open for a month, they'd shut us down again, that type of thing. And people, we have to live. We have to get on with our lives. And I think, personally, this is going to go down as one of the biggest mistakes of all time in the history of this country, that we shut down.
Well, I did a little research last year, right before all of this exploded. Okay, the COVID business exploded. In December of 2019, I was elected to the board of directors here for our local civic association.
Congratulations.
And, yeah, well, and I gotta say, we haven't had another election since then. I'm sure COVID had everything to do with that. But right after all of this happened, I was at a meeting. I think this was around December 2 or 3. I went home. Vicki was with me, of course. I went home. We got ready, went to bed, and at 2:30, 2:45 in the morning, I woke up violently ill. Projectile vomiting and everything. Well, the projectile vomiting eventually went away in a few days, but my bowels were water for the next 2.5 weeks. Sure. And when I finally got over that, that's when all the noise about COVID began. Now, as I discovered, because I was curious and I did a little snooping around, there were individuals that knew that this new virus came out of China, and that we had been hosting people coming to and from. I mean, California always does.
Oh, LAX was, you talking hundreds of thousands of Chinese coming through that airport.
All the time. All the time. So, I mean, I am not surprised that this virus got a sneaky start on us.
On the West Coast, especially.
Yeah, on the West, absolutely on the West Coast.
We also have a lot of flights coming into Seattle, and I know that because I had been to China on 3 occasions just before the outbreak.
Oh, really?
And I had returned the November, was my last trip, the November before. So just before the outbreak, the official outbreak. And I came back and I wasn't feeling well. And I developed a hacking cough that would not subside. And I was out shopping with my wife, and there I was in the middle of the store, and I couldn't stop coughing. I mean, I couldn't cup my face tight enough to, stop. And I finally said, I think I need help. Maybe we should go to the emergency. And on the way, I thought, okay, let's go to a walk-in. It's after hours, and so let's go to a walk-in clinic. Well, they had me put a mask on because I was coughing just chronically. And they took x-rays, and I will never forget when the doctor came out and said, Don, your lungs look like you have emphysema. And it was like, wait a minute, I've never smoked in my life. I've just come back from China. I don't know what happened over there, but my lungs look like I have she was insisting on my being admitted to a hospital that evening. Now, I had a trip scheduled the very next day. So it's like, no, I need to get on a plane tomorrow morning. So, you got to get me well. You got to, at least get me on that plane. And I can, hopefully recover even a little bit at my destination, that type of thing. And I already started feeling better the next day with a strong antibiotic. I was taking a lot of electrolytes. I was using an inhaler to keep my lungs clear. But I met with the doctor months later, and she said to me, Don, I think you had COVID. I think you may indeed have contacted while you were over in China. So I'd like to get checked for the antibodies, but then my doctor now says that they tend to dissipate after 90 days. I don't know if that's correct or not.
Have you had the vaccine?
No, I haven't. And I've been well ever since. And I live out in the country area. But so I think it's another reason I like to get checked for the antibodies.
Do you think you'll get the vaccine?
At the moment, no. And only because I'm not anti-vaccine as much as I'd like. My concern is it hasn't been tested. Not the way as far as, the FDA typically tests, any type of vaccination. It can take 5 to 10 years. And I'm a little concerned that it's being tested on us right now.
Yeah. Well, in full disclosure, I've had a lot of pressure coming my way. The Veterans Administration contacted me, and they currently have it available. So I made an appointment, and I am scheduled for 2 injections, the first next week and the next one after that, 3 weeks. Now, my wife and I are currently undergoing some kitchen remodeling, and we're talking chaos by a million. All right.
Been there.
Chaos by at least a million.
Yourself when you're finished. I will never do this again. Yeah.
So anyway, we've been up to our eyebrows in all kinds of good things. So yeah, I'm really, I got to tell you, Don, I'm really looking forward to that first shot. Oh, yes, I am.
And it's not so much, I'm not hearing any negative effects necessarily with the first, but especially with the Moderna, that it's the second shot. In fact, even I observed that CBS News had questioned, Bill Gates himself, and they used a number of 80% of the inoculated have been having some negative side effects.
Let me ask you, where the hell did Gates go to medical school at?
Well, precisely. And then when whoever elected him, the idea that all of a sudden he's calling the shots. Then let's talk to the children in India with the polio vaccine.
Here's a little highlight about Bill Gates. Now, Gates is always credited with the genius that started Microsoft Corporation. Yes. Well, he certainly was the guy. Him and his little coterie of buddies. But where did they get their first OS, Don? They bought it from a guy for $50,000.
Right. You're correct.
They didn't make it. Hell no. They bought it.
And
the rest, as they say, is history.
It's like when we were younger.
I shocked myself with the amount of trivia and crap in my head.
Well, But when it's life experience and when it's applicable, and the idea that we have to remain informed, and God knows the mainstream media is no longer performing, their assigned duty. They're supposed to protect us from those that we have not elected, as well as those we have.
We got no media. There are no journalists, my friend. It is dead. What we got today...
They're statists.
Are propagandists.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, they have an agenda. I remember when we were doing one of the documentaries with Miles O'Brien, and he was the head science reporter at CNN at that time. And we were in Roswell, and we were having, a very professional, cordial as far as relationship as we were filming. And it was the last day, and we happened to be in the very hangar. I think you've been there. It's called Building 84 at the former Roswell Army Airfield.
Oh yeah.
The B-29 hangar where the wreckage and the bodies all transited through. And we were off camera, and he says to me, "Don, I have to ask you this. You spent a good part of your adult life working on this. You've spent all these years, working on Roswell. Why are you doing this?" And I looked him square in the eye, and I said, "Because you won't." Didn't talk to me the rest of the day because I was struck, a very sharp nerve. But the point is, it was correct. I mean, these people, they're tremendously overpaid for the fact that they're generally just reading from teleprompters. There's no such thing. I mean, investigative journalism is truly a lost art.
Well, they are biased. I mean, the bias is palatable.
Yes.
Look, I'm old enough to remember, and I know you're old enough to remember, Jerry Ford, after Richard Nixon resigned.
Right.
And that was just about the time Saturday Night Live was starting. Right. Okay. And hey, I'll tell you what, the early SNL were brilliant. But, Jerry Ford, who had been an athlete in his youth, okay, I like to use that word, youth, when he was a youth.
The youths of America, right?
Yeah. And he stumbled or something, and before you knew it, everybody was laughing because Jerry Ford was such a stumble bump.
And Chevy Chase was having a field day with it at SNL.
Oh, yes, he was. And recently with Trump, okay, of all people, Joe Biden used to make jokes about the way Trump walked.
Right.
Well, today, okay, Joe Biden, president of the United States, is what they tell me anyway, was going up the ramp on an airplane and fell down the damn ramp. Did you see the video of that?
It was a bad fall. He first stumbled, he caught himself, then he went down again, and then the last time he actually came down and he rolled on his shoulder. So that could have, for a 79-year-old man, he's lucky he didn't break a hip. He's lucky he didn't, break his leg. And
well, did you see that mentioned anywhere in the news?
No, of course not. Of course.
Okay. I see that right there, buddy. I made my point with you.
But that's what we've been dealing with, even with this subject. And that's why I think politically, people will ask, well, why are you so outspoken? And it's like, because we've been there. This is nothing new to us. We've been dealing with these exact same people for, all of our adult lives working on this subject. That you'll give them the entire loaf of bread and they only shave off a few crumbs. And then they think that they can make a single trip down to New Mexico and wrap this up in a day or two.
Yeah.
They think they can look you in the eye and, you can lay it all out, describe to them some of the most profound events that have happened in the history of mankind. And they're already moved on to the next Kardashian show, that type of thing.
Let me ask you, in the last few minutes that we have, believe it or not, the show's almost done, Don.
Great time.
Let me ask you this. If I were to sit you down in a room and shine a really bright light on you. And I'd say, okay, mister, who do you think the final arbiter is of this whole UFO mystery? Ha, ha, ha. What would you say?
Back in the day, I would say that indeed there would have been an oversight committee appointed. I don't believe it was called MJ-12. I know General Arthur Exxon, who was at Wright Field when the wreckage came in, he said that later when he was assigned at the Pentagon, they referred to the group as the Unholy 13, for example.
Right.
Something that would supersede the very office of the president, something that would supersede even the Pentagon itself, that it would have an unlimited budget. Its primary function would be to find out what the hell was going on. What are we dealing with here? Is it something, as we know, has total, impunity flying through our airspace? And the question, do we know from where, from why, from who? And what are, what at that time, especially, what were the intentions? You can only imagine. This is just 1947. It's just 9 years after the War of the Worlds broadcast. Very, very fresh in their memories. They don't know this is the real thing or not. They think that, my God, the radio show has just become reality. And this oversight committee would then extend beyond each administration. And as a result, it would, rise to the pinnacle of where nobody would even know who they were and what they represented. And I think even Oliver North, during the Iran-Contra hearings, he kept referring to the basement White House. I think that was a tinge of what we're talking about, the idea that there are powers within and powers outside that manipulate and control the agenda. And I think if you remember, like William Colby, when he was the director of the CIA, and he talked about how like the CIA owns, everyone of any significance in the major media. And then he went on to describe that there's an entire department of the CIA that writes the news every day. Well, you mean they're reporting the news? Well, no, they're scripting it. They're contriving it. Well, again, for what ends? For whose, benefit, so to speak. So I think so much of what we're talking about goes back to 1947, the National Security Act, and, the splitting off as far as the Air Force, the Army, the beginning of the CIA, and that for the first time, American citizens themselves became suspect.
Well, here's a little wooden shoe, which the French called a sabot, that got thrown into the gearworks for you. If I had to guess, okay, let's say I was designing the intelligence operation to keep a lid on all of this. Mm-hmm. You know who I'd feed into the works, Don? That alleged extraterrestrial intelligence that can appear as human. I would have at least some of them involved in some manner where they could shape and direct events. What do you think?
Well, the thing is, if we accept the phenomenon, we have to accept that if we're dealing with a higher intelligence that is capable of traveling from A to B, they certainly would have no difficulty manipulating and controlling, we human beings. And as a result, just the thought that it may be an alien agenda, and I know our good friend, the late Jim Mars, even talked about, and he wrote about the idea that what if this is, we're living in this petri dish, that we're all being controlled. And lest we, the worst of it be the old Twilight Zone to serve mankind.
Oh, yeah.
The menu.
Right. Yeah. A classic. Oh, my God. That's a mind blower.
And so I think that's the greatest concern that and Stan Freeman used to always talk about that nationalism is the name of the game, the idea that we owe our allegiance to our respective elected officials, but that overnight we would become earthlings, that all borders would dissolve, in a matter of seconds, that type of thing. And so our leaders need to remain in control in their eyes. And what greater threat than something off the planet? The idea that, and maybe the Navy in testing the waters.
Well, I rewatched, and I already mentioned this to Don and to Skywatcher, but last evening, ladies and gentlemen, I rewatched a military science fiction film called Alien Outpost, and I was just giving a brief rendition of what this movie was all about. And it takes place roughly 10 years after an extraterrestrial invasion, and most of the main ET forces were driven off the planet, and they're incidentally trying to come back down, but they left behind thousands of their soldiers, and it takes place in an outpost manned for the most part by Westerners, somewhere between Pakistan and Afghanistan, where some of these aliens retreated to. And do you know when the date of the invasion in the movie took place? June the 13th, 2021. So, in a couple of months, let's keep our eyes open.
So Rod Serling wasn't as much of a futurist as the writer of that particular script.
Yeah, really.
Unbelievable that, we may be living in such days at the moment that for everything that we thought was reality in our lifetimes.
Well, Don, tonight, buddy, has been a genuine pleasure. I want to have you come back again before very long at all. And real quickly, do you have anything coming up on your schedule right now where people can catch you?
We have a Travel Channel series that is coming out in May that I was interviewed for, and I'm supposed to be part of each episode, and it's going to be dealing mainly with the witnesses. They did, as far as psychological stress evaluation, PSE analysis of a lot of the recordings of the witnesses. And so they're going to be presenting as far as the accurate, the genuine, the truthful, juxtaposed to those who may not have been as right and honest. So.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Unfortunately, man, I could go another hour, but we don't have it.
We covered a lot.
Thank you, Don. Thank you so much.
Pleasure was all mine, Don, and my best to Vicki as well. And we will do it again soon.
Absolutely. And next week, ladies and gentlemen, real journalist and UFO reporter Billy Cox will be my guest. That's it for now. Remember, keep those eyes pointed up, your ear to the ground, and we'll see you next time. Have a great weekend.